Hello there. I hope that finding this would be helpful in some way. I am writing this to share my story of a lost soul trapped in an endless nightmare that only gets more dreadful as time passes, and I hope that no one else will share the same experience. It's been so long since this has happened, so pardon me for the lack of details. Anyway, this is a story to tell you of my fateful encounter with an unknown being. No, it's not a poltergeist or some specter, but I suppose the closest description would be a god. Unfortunately, I was unable to understand his name, so I only refer to him as UB, or Unknown Being, from here on. I met him during a time where I decided to take my own life, and although most of the events happened too long ago, this part was etched in my mind too deeply to be forgotten. I looked at my phone for one last time. August 7th, 2016, 4:18 a.m. I took a deep breath and sighed as I prepared myself to cross to the other side of consciousness, assuming death itself is a transition between two states of consciousness. I had the noose wrapped tightly around my neck and was ready to give the stool a kick when, suddenly, I noticed a pristine white envelope lying on the table. I was aware that if I just got over with my plan, it wouldn't bother in the long run, but something inside of me, as if my soul was screaming, compelled me to open the envelope. So I took off the noose and checked all over the envelope. It was pure white with nothing written on it, and I broke the seal to take out a folded note which said, "Would you like to start a new journey with slight changes?" Before I had any time to process what was happening or who sent me this letter, even why I was receiving this letter, my eyes were seared with a sudden white light. Upon regaining my vision, I was in an unknown space where white stretched as far as the eye can see. Though the place was unknown and lonely, I felt comfortable and at peace with the silence, as if someone was reading my mind and wished to break my tranquility. A large hand tapped on my shoulder. As I looked back, I was greeted by a middle-aged man in a tuxedo, smiling at me. As soon as our eyes met, he immediately asked, "Do you know the reason why you're here, boy?" "Well, no, sir." I tried saying some more, but there were no words to speak. To this, he gave me a smug laugh and replied, "All right, let me introduce myself. I am God, and you are here because I specifically chose you to go over your life once more. But you will retain your memories and knowledge from your past life. Although you have to remember that there are some things in life you can't really change, even with your retained memories. Now you shall go, and complete your life as you please." Yubi's voice reverberated throughout my head as my vision blurred and eventually faded as I was transported back to Earth. As I grew up, I was able to become the person I always wanted to be. Life had never been better, and I was always looking forward to the next day, unfolding it the way I wanted it. Finally, I understood what a walk in the park meant. Oh, and UB was also there for me. He didn't help me directly, but he was kind of a good friend that I could always talk to. Since he was kind of like a god, I was able to converse with him telepathically, so it didn't really look strange when I spoke to him in public. By the end of high school, I was pretty much friends with most people, and I was quite skilled at writing, just the way I wanted to grow up. For college, I decided to take computer science just like during my past life. I wanted to prove to myself that I would be able to get through it without failing this time around. I guess having some base knowledge about what I'll be facing is kind of cheating, but hey, life isn't fair, so why should I play by the rules? Toward the final weeks of my second year in college, my friend brought me to a party. I wasn't really the type of person to go to these kinds of events, but he was a friend I found difficulty declining. There we sat, in a table at the corner of the room. I was pretty bored and I was just reading a book on my phone. I wasn't sure what my friend was doing, but he eventually called out to someone behind me. She came over and my friend introduced me to her. Her bright eyes looked at mine intently as my friend beckoned her. Her name was Christine, and she studied at a university one town away from mine. Initially, I was pretty nervous as I wasn't comfortable speaking with strangers, especially when we had nothing in common, but she made me feel comfortable as we spoke, and Her charming looks just captivated me. She had long brown hair tied in the back in a ponytail, dripping down at her back. She had dark, black eyes which had a gaze that took you to another world. It was irresistible, and the way her soft pink lips moved as she spoke only furthered my infatuation. It was starting to get late, so I decided to walk Christine all the way back to her home. Thankfully, we did get there safely, and I immediately went home, all giddy and excited. When I got home, I immediately texted her asking how she was, and we just continued on and on. Just as the start of a new day brings end to darkness, our conversation was brought to an end by the dawn of a budding sweet relationship. After 2 years, I had successfully graduated and earned my degree, and I had UB to thank. Christine and I kept in touch, and although we walked down different paths after college, we always spent time chatting with each other on the internet when time permitted us. Eventually, we got to know each other's families, and sometimes I'd have her stay over at my family's house for dinner. Although it was more often that I was the one coming over to her place, since she was an only child and her parents wanted to spend time with her on Saturday nights. We also took jobs in the same city, so although work life was more difficult and complicated than college life, we at least got to meet one another after the day's end. On Christine's 26th birthday, I decided to leave work early and surprise her with a fairly expensive dinner. I was a bit short on cash that night, so I had to withdraw some money from the nearby ATM. Around 4:10 p.m., I went to a cafe that was located conveniently across Christine's workplace. That way I could kill some time by browsing the internet and be able to notice when she exited her building. I waited around 2 hours before she got out, and I quickly packed up my laptop and rushed to greet her. Just as she smiled when she saw me, 2 men wearing tuxedos from both sides ran towards me and started firing shots. I dropped to the ground, unable to support my body with a sharp pain resonating all over. I worried that they might hurt Christine as well, but they just ran away. Whoever they were, I was a bit relieved that I was their only target. After a brief moment, my breathing became heavier and I eventually lost consciousness. When I woke up, UB was staring at me with the same smug smile he had before. I had a hunch that he was somehow involved, considering the men donned the same suit that he had. Without thinking about anything else, I immediately asked, "Those men, you're connected to them somehow, aren't you?" I'd be lying if I said no, so yes, I did send them. But why? What for? I thought you were on my side. I was just having the time of my life. Okay, boy, look, I'm on no one's side. I'm not your friend or your ally or anything. You're even lucky I gave you a chance to redo your entire life, with perks to top it off. So, what now? Are you going to finally seal my soul somewhere and lock me up for eternity? No. Actually, you get a 3rd life and a 4th and a 5th and so on. With the accumulated knowledge, you should eventually get the hang of it, right? Well, off you go. Before I could even protest your comment, there I was, crying as an infant and beginning my 3rd incarnation. Just as my 2nd life, I went through school and college with minimal difficulty. In this incarnation, I also met Christine. It seemed as though my memory retainment was exclusive to me, so I had to rebuild our relationship and replay our conversations. I'd hate to admit it, but this time around it stung me inside a bit. The memories you shared, the laughs, the tears, everything was gone. Nonetheless, I made it my goal in this life to keep her safe so we could live a normal life together. To cut the long story short, we were pretty much in the clear now. Or so I thought until the night that I died the last lifetime reoccurred. This time, it was slightly different though. I waited in the cafe, browsing the internet, and when Christine was outside the building, I rushed to her, but I looked both left and right. Thankfully, there were no suspicious people around. We got to the car and we were heading towards the restaurant to celebrate her birthday. Just as I reached the last turn before the street of the restaurant, our large truck speeded head-on directly towards us. During the impact, I lost consciousness for a short while, but eventually sprang back to check on Christine. Blood smeared throughout her forehead from where she was hit. She was unconscious, and I immediately called for an ambulance. By the time we reached the hospital, she was pronounced dead. The emptiness haunted me. I stared at her cold corpse, recalling the events that led to this tragedy. Regret and anger smothered all other thoughts. If only I had capitalized on the small window to turn and weaken the impact. If only I had chosen to do things differently. When I got home, it was around 10 p.m. The bed we used to share felt too big to me. Our apartment wasn't really the largest, and we used to think it was pretty small, but having all this space to myself made me feel like I owned an endless field, nothing but the howling wind to accompany me. Around midnight, I got up and went to the nearest train station. I was just too tired to do anything else. As the train approached, at a swift speed, I jumped to meet the train leading to a painless death. At this point, I'm not even surprised anymore. UB was a traitor, and I despised him so much for that. I despised myself even more for believing that his little game would eventually grant me joy. UB had that same smug smile when I first met him. I let him do all his talking about accumulating knowledge and getting through life. He didn't seem to care about how I felt, so he didn't say much after that, and simply repeated my life for the 4th time. This time, I died again during Christine's birthday. Some undetected disease apparently working its way over the years that I was unable to tend to. At this point, I was just confused and tired, so I inquired about why it always had to end this way. UB's response filled me with a newfound fury. It was the ire that lasted forever until I got what I wanted. The very reason why, the 5th life onwards, I began doing everything in my power to escape this nonsense. All right, boy. Do you really want to know why you keep dying? Do you remember this? He reveals the rope that I was supposed to use to end my life the first time. I replied nothing, so eventually he continued. Yeah? You can look at this rope as a reflection of yourself and the many threads that make it the lives you live. As you can see, all the threads run through the rope independently, but they all have the same end. These threads may be unique to one another, such as there are no two threads that are exactly alike. But together they start and together they end as well. No matter how much knowledge you attain and how differently you live one life to another, you will always meet the same end. You were designed to be a tragedy, and you will stay that way no matter what. That is the simple way that I have designed you, and you will continue to do this until you have died in every possible way. So, boy, off you go once more. Lifetime after lifetime, death after death, rebirth after rebirth. I've always been trying to save Christine and myself. At this point, I have probably died at least 200 times, and I'm pretty damn tired. I've tried to circumvent UB's design by dying an earlier day before, but it doesn't work. I've also tried poisoning both Christine and I with her consent, but I'm afraid it was to no avail. However, I will continue to attempt escaping this bitter end so long as Christine and I cross paths. With that, I part here now with a simple message. Please remember that all those second chances are a sign of mercy and grace. It is always best to think twice whether it really is better the second time around.